Welcome back to Bleav in the Broncos on the Bleav Network. I'm Patrick Chiotti. That's Bri Maestas. Bri, the undrafted rookies are set. Minicamp is about to start. Still no numbers. We got one. We got a number. Schedule release is coming up. It's an exciting time for it being the slow season of the NFL. We're very happy that everyone is here. Bri, how are you doing?
Maybe that's the reason. The slow season for the NFL means we're all in peril without rookie numbers. I am not as invested. I'm not as invested as other people are with the lack of. Would I like to know? Yes. Is it ending me? Not so much. So I'm looking forward to what they decide, but nobody's going to be happy. And so I can't wait to jump back on the show with you and discuss it once those are released. But guys, I think there's more important things to note of what's going to happen this season.
RJ Harvey, give him number 7. Just do it. I don't care. Don't care anymore.
Important?
Nah. I mean, they retired it, but like for what? You know? There's a whole other argument for retirement of numbers, but we're not going to get into that right now. Bri, we've got some awesome things that we're going to talk about on the show. Big trade happened in the NFL. One that had some ties to the Broncos, potentially could still have some ties to the Broncos leading into the season. Another player released from his team after signing a massive contract last offseason. We're going to talk about why the Broncos should not probably bring this player in, or if Bri thinks they should, why she thinks it's a good idea. And then we're going to talk about these UDFAs that the Broncos bring in. There's always one that makes this team. Who's it going to be? Which undrafted free agent are the Denver Broncos going to keep on their final roster? And they elected a new pope. So naturally, we have to talk about it because he's an American and he's probably very likely a Bears fan. So that's amazing. Will the Bears have better Super Bowl odds now that the Pope has been elected? I don't know, but it's a valid thing to think about. Bri, George Pickens traded from the Pittsburgh Steelers to the Dallas Cowboys. I honestly saw the Steelers going into the season with both Pickens and DK Metcalf. I know that there were a lot of trade rumors with Pickens. He's going into the final year of his deal. He wants a new deal. Cowboys are kind of telling him, no, you're going to play this year out. Should the Broncos, let's start with this. Should the Broncos have been in on a trade for George Pickens?
Yeah, I mean, we heard the rumblings of it, and I think this is one of those trades that says a lot more about the Steelers than just a roster shuffle. This guy was supposed to be, wide receiver 1, the future of Pittsburgh, and they're in turmoil. Just simply from a quarterback standpoint, offense standpoint, there's questions about, how long Mike Tomlin is for the league. But Pickens is an explosive talent. He's evident in the go-to presence that he brings to any offense. So the Steelers moving on from him early in his career, I think that speaks volumes to what's going on behind the scenes. He's kind of everything you would want in a young receiver, but outside of where I think Denver has to stay away from this pick and why they ultimately did, is he hasn't exactly been drama-free. And I think Pittsburgh was concerned about this just from an emotional maturity standpoint, being very vocal about frustrations on the sidelines and maybe possibly didn't handle adversity to the state in which Pittsburgh wanted. So I think the Broncos really had to keep their hands free of this, because even though he has like a similar profile to Courtland Sutton, I don't think you're giving up your future picks for somebody of this caliber, while the Broncos are in like a very seemingly rebuild culture under Sean Payton. I think it's too much of a risk to stand. I get the appeal though, right? So I think Pickens is flashy and fun and productive, but Denver's not really in the mindset to collect talent. They're trying to build a sustainable roster. They don't have to worry about their quarterback. They have to worry about balancing. And I think passing on Pickens was the smart long-term move here.
Yeah, I think all the things that you said about George Pickens right on, right? Like, great downfield threat as a receiver, but there's a lot of things when, like, if you watch this kid play, it's like, yeah, he's talented and he's talented, but man, there's just the in-game discipline is not there. Like, starting so many fights and just unnecessary penalties. Like, I can appreciate a guy who, works his ass off and blocks his ass off in games and is physical, like, sets the tone. That's fine. It's the extracurricular stuff that you're doing after plays, after games, like clearing sidelines. Like, we can't be doing that. So, speaking to what you were saying about what the Broncos are trying to build in the locker room, I was having a very long-winded argument with somebody yesterday on Twitter, as to why they didn't bring in any of these big receivers, no DK Metcalf, no George Pickens, no Cooper Kupp, no, like, none of these big names. And simply because the Broncos are looking for people who are going to fit their locker room culture, who are going to buy into what Sean Payton is selling and what he is trying to do. If you add a George Pickens to this room and subtract a Courtland Sutton, I don't know about that, because Courtland's a fine talent on the field, but he is a locker room gem. He's a good guy. He's a good teammate. Those are the types of guys that you want to keep around for the culture. Adding another person into that, especially one with the, I don't want to say ego, but like the ego of George Pickens, I think that it would have spelled disaster. It would have been really bad.
No, I think that's a good point too. And any team that would have been thinking of trading for him would have been on the hook for a big money extension. Oh, yeah. And that really ties into, like, okay, Dallas, good for you. Like, they fit the bill for a team that was going to commit that, because you're committing major cap space to a guy that you've seen how he fits into a system. And you mentioned the locker room presence. I 1,000% agree with that. That would have been my biggest concern had that move been made.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic works in Dallas with CD and now Pickens. Like, is Pickens just going to be fighting people downfield while CD is getting the majority of the targets? I think it's going to be a good add for the offense, and like Dak is going to be able to hit some of those downfield throws a little bit better. And it's certainly, he's going to see more one-on-one coverage. I think Benjamin Albright pointed out, that he's going to be seeing more CB2s than CB1s, which, fair point. But I think there's an opportunity there for the Dallas offense to see a little bit of revival in the pass game after the last couple of years. But man, for the Broncos, I just don't know if Pickens would have been the right move. But it does lead me to another wide receiver, Bri, Gabe Davis, who signed a massive deal last offseason with the Jacksonville Jaguars, leaving the Buffalo Bills. Gets hurt in Jacksonville. Things just really didn't go his way. He only had 2 touchdowns, 4 penalties last year, 2 touchdowns. It was a really head-scratching signing then. And the fact that they released him after, a coaching transition this offseason, not a surprise. I did see some Broncos fans on Twitter saying, this is the perfect ad for the Broncos offense. This is the perfect ad. He's only 26 years old. XYZ. I just don't see it. I don't see the plus side of bringing Gabe Davis in, especially after drafting Pat Bryant. They're 2 different types of players, but Gabe Davis is just like straight line speed. He's just straight line downfield target. We're going to target him past the sticks every single time. I just don't see that as the type of player that the Broncos need to add to the wide receiver room. What say you?
I mean, I'm split here, because Davis was supposed to be a real key addition for the Jaguars and their receiving core, right? And then you get injuries and inconsistencies. It left a lot to be desired in his 2024 season. So I could see where the Jags are looking to go with a different dynamic, but you don't pay that type of money without knowing what that caliber of player is like capable of bringing to the table, right? And I think Davis is at a crossroads in his career, right? He's decently young. We've seen what he can do in flashes, and I know he didn't light it up, but injuries also slowed him down. I just don't think he ever found a rhythm in Jacksonville, but we can't forget who he was with the Bills. And you talked about it, the field stretching ability, the downfield threat, the red zone potential as a weapon. I don't know if a fresh start would guarantee that. And I think that's where it gets really difficult when you start talking about, well, there's this and that talent available for the Broncos. I mentioned it earlier when talking about Pickens, right? The Broncos are in a developmental year and they've got a rookie quarterback. They've got Sean Payton as their head coach, and he's trying to build offense around his personnel. Then you're trying to shove pieces in to fit that. But I think Gabe Davis fits the mold of a complementary piece. Like, you talk about the vertical stretch. He could be your guy there, your chunk yardage option, but I don't know if it's necessarily going to be the right fit. I think it's a lot of potential versus like taking a big swing risk, right? But Denver could probably get him on a short-term deal, right? Not commanding top dollar, giving his upsetting performance in 2024. I think if it was a heavy incentive deal and it was short-term, you could move on if it didn't pan out. But we just saw that not work out with the Jaguars. So I'd be surprised if they didn't kick the tires, because the Broncos, run a really well-run organization, and I'm sure that there was calls to see what it would cost them. But the team sits in sort of a really weird developmental or bust timeline. I just don't know if they can afford the risk. So even though I'm not maybe staunchly opposed to it, I think that there's reasons why they're probably not going to make that decision.
Yeah, and when I went back and I looked at Gabe Davis, especially in those last 2 years in Buffalo, his efficiency was just like creeping down. Like he had a great season. I think it was 2022 or 2021, excuse me. And then 22, it went down. Like his passer rating when thrown to went down 20 points. I was like, ooh, that's a big drop. And then it went down again. And then it went down another 20 points in Jacksonville. So it's like we have to look at that and say, okay, what type of player are they actually getting in this situation? When he was with Buffalo, it was awesome because he had Josh Allen, and Josh Allen could just play his brand of football. Like, I'm just going to huck it deep. Gabe Davis is going to be down there somewhere. And that one season that he had that was really, really good in Buffalo was he was really great at moving the sticks. And that's a big plus. He was killing it in the middle of the field, and that was awesome. And then it was just like deep outside. And I think his last 2 seasons in Buffalo, 12 interceptions when thrown to. 12 interceptions. So it's like they were just basically just playing 50-50 at that point. I don't really see that as something the Broncos necessarily need. They have speed. We're going to see Marvin Mims's role grow. And from what it was towards the end of last season. And we're also probably going to see more Troy Franklin. Whether that's good or bad, we're going to see more Troy Franklin simply because he has that speed, right? And I just don't really see them making a move to bring Gabe Davis in. I like kick the tires on it, sure, see what he wants. But when you look at the types of receivers that they were looking at in free agency, kicking the tires on Stephon Diggs, that's a completely different type of receiver, right? That's a guy who can win at the line, who can win in the middle of the field, understands how to read defenses. That's what they were going for. And you made a great point in the last episode talking about Pat Bryant, where he has all of those traits and he has what the Broncos were looking to add to the wide receiver room, whether or not it's the flashy, 4.3 speed that everybody else wanted them to add. They went for what they needed, and they needed somebody who can convert third downs. That's what they needed. That's what they got. I'm good on Gabe Davis. I'm also fine with them not making the trade for George Pickens. I'd rather pay Cortland Sutton for 2 more seasons at 26, 27 million, whatever the number is going to be. It's going to be high. But I'd rather pay that for 2 more years than give up draft capital and still have to pay George Pickens for the next 4 years.
Yeah, and I think in general, when you make the consensus pick of, are you still getting the versatility that you're clamoring for, right? You're building up the development through your draft picks, and you still have Cortland Sutton. You're in a pretty good position. Are you getting everything that you want out of that? No, but you can't take the mystery door prize of, well, maybe if you take a swing on another player, that they're going to get you the same amount of productivity. Like, it's just, it's too unknown. And I think people get in the mindset of like, oh, it's replaceable. Not as easily as you would think. And that's why contracts are the way that they are. And that doesn't work that way.
Yeah. And there was another point I brought up to somebody who was like, oh, well, we just need to keep bringing in talent to push everybody else on the roster. I told them, go look at what Sean Payton did in New Orleans and how many years he stuck with the trio of Robert Meacham. Or sorry, not Robert Meacham. Great, it's slipping my mind. It was Kenny Stills, Lance Moore, and why am I not thinking of? Was it Meacham? It might have been Meacham.
I can't help you here. I'm lost.
I know. But it regardless, he stuck with the same like key trio of players from like 2007 to like 2011. It was the same trio of receivers through the whole damn time. Like, he drafted every single one of those guys. And so it's like, yeah, he's going to want to stick with his development. Marquise Colston. Thank you. Yeah, there it is. Marquise Colston, Kenny Stills, and Lance Moore. He stuck with that trio for like 3-4 seasons.
I was going to say, Meacham was a Saint, though, so you weren't far off, but
I was close. But he also didn't really bring in any like big veterans during that time either, especially at the receiver position. David Patton was the only one that he like brought in who was on the tail end of his career. He got everything he needed out of him, and then he booted him out of town, right? He brought in Jeremy Shockey, who was a tight end, but it helped the offense tremendously. He's going to stick with his wide receivers that he picks and that he drafts. He'll sprinkle in a vet here and there, Ted Ginn, Emmanuel Sanders for that one season. But other than that, he's sticking with his guys. And he has shown through history, he stuck with Brandon Cooks for 3 years and then out the door, right? He got what he needed out of him and then gone. So get ready for a lot of Vele. Get ready to see Pat Bryant. Somebody said Pat Bryant's not going to see the field this year. That's crazy. That's crazy talk. He is going to see the field quite a bit. But
I think people need to get. Can we talk to that just for real quickly before we move on? The idea that, and I've seen it a lot. You've been involved in these conversations over on X. Is the idea that you've lost potential in your wide receiver if they're not throwing up these explosive numbers, if they're not leading the charge in touchdowns, if they're not hitting 1,000 yards per season, then there's somehow a bust, right? And I feel like there's a misnomer out there that the worthiness and efficiency of a wide receiver or any offensive skill position is the idea that if they're not racking up yards and or touchdowns, that they're not leading to the overall big picture of how the game of football is played. And I've always had an issue with this because the way you're going to tell whether or not Pat Bryant is successful is not a whole lot of box stat score watching. You're just not going to be able to tell the ability to lend himself to this offense. And so I want to use him as a prime example as we continue to talk about him through the season at the end when we start grading out this draft class. And it's very infantile stages, is that you're going to want to see on a down by down basis what he was able to bring to those drives and those yards. And so it's just a multi-level excuse that I think people find themselves in, especially when you're talking about players that could come in and have an immediate impact, is you're too caught up in what they were bringing on a stats perspective to a team. A lot of that goes in the same realm as, are you using stats and film to have this discussion? But more so, you even have to break it down to, it's not just their skill set and their availability to have that skill set in a roster. It's on any given down, what are you choosing to do, and did you use them to their fullest ability? And so
Yep.
I just want to point that out, as Pat Bryant could be a huge success for this offense moving forward, and he very well could be looking like a wide receiver 7 when we're talking about what his stats are. So that's where I get really frustrated, is when we're talking about like, oh, he's not going to outpace. That's not what he's being asked to do. That's not his role in this team.
Exactly. No, and that is such a perfect way to put it, because I told that person, like, if he's converting third downs, if all he does as a rookie is convert third downs and keep the offense on the field and block his ass off on run plays and spring big runs, that's a win. It's a win. I'll take that. And like the people can be upset about it, but like the longer your offense is on the field, the more points you're going to score, the more games you're going to win. I'll take that. I'll take that.
And the heavier your defensive coordinator is not going to tear his headset off and crack it over his leg.
What doesn't show up in the box stats? How many blocks you have on rundowns? How much separation you're getting on certain routes. It's not going to. It'll show up on ESPN, but it won't show up on the actual box stats. Those are the things that are so invaluable, and he does a lot of those things. When you watch his film, he is out there throwing his weight around, and he is a team first player. Those are the players that you want to keep around in your locker room. I don't care about how many reps he's getting at wide receiver 2, which is not a position. The coaches aren't going up to the whiteboard and drawing up wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. No, stop. Please.
I think that's a miscommunication with depth charts, right? Because you see a depth chart and you're like, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're like, I see where you're going with that. But in a depth chart, there's a lot of.
It's it's a wild tangent, but I think what
I had to.
What Pat Bryant is going to bring to the team is invaluable, and I think a lot of people are going to be shocked at how efficient the quick game is going to be, how much more efficient our quick game is going to be, and how this is going to change our third down offense. We were god awful. They were god awful last year, and a lot of it had to do with just not having the right guys for those situations. I think we're going to see a lot less longer third downs, more like medium to shorter third downs, hopefully.
And it also lends the ability that you could be surprised by the development of like an Audric Estime and then paired with RJ Harvey, because there is an idea that it was poor talent that was leading to the lack of production. And we've yet to see that play out. We can't make a determination on that. Yeah. But this is really going to show us if the run game was necessarily the problem simply because they were being handicapped by what the offense was trying to do, especially on third down. So I'm glad you brought that up. Sorry for the tangent. I just had to get it off my head.
No more wide receiver number talk when we're talking about. It's fine to talk about it in the league standpoint, like, oh, this guy's he's the 7th best wide receiver in the league, blah, blah, blah. But when we're talking about the offense and the way that a team is built, we're not talking about that. Come on now. Bri, undrafted free agents.
Yes.
We've talked a lot about these wide receivers. Undrafted free agents. The Broncos have brought in 13 undrafted free agents. I'm just going to go down the list here. It is on the bottom of the ticker there. But wide receiver Joaquin Davis from North Carolina Central. Wide receiver Jerwan Newton from Toledo. Wide receiver Courtney Jackson from Arkansas State. The offensive lineman Marquise Cox from Kentucky, Xavier Truss from Georgia, fun one to watch. Clay Webb, Jacksonville State. We're not going to use his nickname on this show. And Joe Machowski from Oklahoma State. One D lineman, Christian Dowell from UT Martin. Outside linebacker in Johnny Walker from Missouri. Two other linebackers, JB Brown from Kansas and Kareem Reed from Utah, and a couple of corners, Jaden Robinson from Oregon State, go Beavs, and Kendall Bowler from Florida A&M. Bri, the Broncos usually have one undrafted free agent, make the team every year. And it's a big thing. And they've had a long-standing history of undrafted success. Rod Smith, Chris Harris Jr., just to name a couple off the top, Philip Lindsay. But I want to know, from your standpoint, which of these undrafted free agents do you love that the Broncos brought in, and which one do you see making the roster? Only one.
Okay. Well, I feel like you're saying that like oftentimes they do. I think it's something crazy. Like the 20 of the last 21 seasons, the Broncos have had an undrafted free agent make the roster.
It's pretty
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I think if I had to make a bet, it's going to be one of the offensive linemen for sure. It's pretty easy to see. It's probably Webb because of his versatility and his pedigree. The needs of the Broncos line up perfectly here, right? They're missing their journeyman offensive lineman who can just plug and play. I think Webb is physically and technically ahead of most of the pack for providing O-line backup and depth. He'll stick if he's got what it takes in pass protection, but I love how they're loading up here in line for the depth. Like I think Cox is most likely to end up on the practice squad because he's a solid run blocker and he's got all that athleticism and leverage. But that's a developmental swing guy, which they're desperately seeking since Quinn Bailey got injured last year during camp. And you said only one, so I'm going to go in that direction. I'd love for there to be a battle. I'd love for there to be somebody who really stands out, and I'm saying it's probably Webb, just given what he's bringing and kind of how he lines up with what the Broncos need.
I was going to make a Powerade joke, but we're going to save that. I think you're right on path there. I do like Xavier Truss. I think his size, the patient, like there's a lot there, and I think they could probably mold that. Whether he's going to be, I don't know if he can play on the left side. I was taking a peek at Joe Michalski's numbers, his grades from Oklahoma State. Center, 6'5", 305. Pretty big dude.
That's big.
And for a center, if he can move, that's pretty good. I know that's probably an area where they're going to be looking like, you said Webb, but Webb also has versatility to play guard. So that's something that they desperately need. Could Michalski play guard? I don't know. I need to watch him move a little bit. But
I'm worried about some of them, though, with their lineup, with their speed against quicker defensive tackles, right? That's Truss's whole point is that, some of these guys really could fill in there, but are they ready to see the field?
And I think over the next year, probably 2 seasons, we're going to see them really, really targeting tackle with McGlinchey and Bowles potentially being on the outs. So wouldn't be surprised to see one of those guys kept around as like a development. They still have Palczewski. Who knows what they're going to do with Frank Crum. But I think there's some areas there where they definitely have some developmental traits. I'm going to say, though, the one that I agree with you. I think it is going to be an offensive lineman. But I would just love if this team kept Juwan Newton on the roster. I would absolutely love it because I spent some time last week really watching him, and I was like, man, this guy would be Lance Moore for Sean Payton. Like, this is the new version of Lance Moore. He's not a burner, not super great speed, but he knows how to separate. Runs really great routes. They used him in all sorts of different ways. They used him as a point in bunch formations. They gave him end arounds. They used him very well in the red zone. I was really shocked. Physical guy, can make all the contested catches, and he's not that big. His brother is Johnny Newton, who just got drafted by the Commanders last season, played at Illinois. Loved him. So the pedigree is there. I don't think that they end up keeping him just because of how the wide receiver room is now. But man, he's a lot of fun. And he would be an awesome guy to have in this offense. And it would make me really happy. But I do think they're going to go in the direction of offensive line.
He's a little undersized for me. And I like the physicality, because if you play a lot bigger than you are, that speaks volumes on how you're able to really distinguish yourself. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we were talking about that before, but also reliability in pass catching. Like that's super underrated just in general. Like I want to point out though, because I know this is going to speak to you, and this is kind of what's been on my mind as far as undrafted free agents go. The ability to make an impact on special teams is going to really delineate any sort of like hunches you have, right? Because anybody who can compete and elevate special teams has a leg up on everyone else. But the Broncos are stacked in their secondary, and you mentioned Kendall Bullard to start the show. Got to show some flashes in training camp, but that's somebody who stands out to me, who they could make the practice squad, or they could be like an early step in for special teams, depending on what Darren Rizzi sees out of him. So there's a lot of guys who probably aren't going to make the roster from this bunch of 12 or 13. But I think there's also the notion of, depending on how versatile you are, those are the winning formulas for having success, just specifically with Sean Payton and this Denver Broncos team, because of where their head is at, trying to complete the 3-point trifecta for a perfectly balanced football team. So that's what I'm hoping to see out of all of this, is who can play all the ways.
Yeah. And I mean, we talked about this in the draft recap episode of the value of guys like Quay Robinson coming in as a rookie, Caleb Lohner, him coming in. He's not going to start. He's not going to be the starting tight end week one, but he's going to have to get his reps on special teams. So I think it's such a valuable piece too, when you're looking at it. Not everybody can be a Chris Harris Jr. I'm looking at Kendall Bullard right now, 6 foot, 195. So pretty thick corner, allowed 77.6 NFL passer rating when thrown to, 58% catch rate. So there's something to love there on the defensive side, and 68 special team snaps last year, mostly on field goal. So that's where he's going to have to earn his money. That's where he's going to have to earn his spot. But I'm pretty intrigued as a whole by this group of UDFAs, because no running backs is certainly a choice. A lot of wide receivers. I think it's Courtney. It's Joaquin
Courtney
Davis.
Jackson. Oh, okay.
Joaquin Davis is like 6'4", 220. It's great, like crazy athlete. His numbers left a little bit to be desired, but I think there's an interesting vision that they're going for. And I think you're on the right path of, it's going to be special teams. They're looking for guys who can elevate the special teams unit and make an impact. I think we kind of forget that Trent Sherfield is here as well. And he's going to be a key special team or two. So there's a lot of spots that are going to be battles, and it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot more difficult than, who's going to be wide receiver 4 of the Broncos this year? It's like, no, who's going to be the gunner on punt? Who are the 2 guys that are going to be fighting for that position, right? Who's going to be taking over for PJ Locke as the PP on punt team? Like that's what they're going to try and find out. And I think that they're bringing in talent to figure that out. A couple of these pieces seem like, maybe we could develop this guy into something on the offensive or defensive side, but I feel a lot of it is special teams.
Pretty good for the worst roster in the NFL in 2024.
Yeah, pretty good for the worst roster. Now we're being called the best defense in the league.
Now we're being called waking up, national media.
Yeah, for real. Bri, this was a fun episode. I love talking undrafted free agents and wide receivers with you. It's so much fun. Next week, the NFL schedule will be released. We will be back to talk about the Broncos schedule. We already know there's going to be a London game. I'm very excited about it. I hope we could go. That would be crazy. But I'm really excited to see where the Broncos are going to play. Bri and I are going to be here to break down every game, the biggest matchups, all that stuff. Thank you so much for joining us, Bri. Any final words before we get out of here?
Sorry to all the Packers fans with the new Pope news. I'm sure that doesn't sit well at all, but someone had to be sacrificial.
What if the Pope What if the Pope had come out of the window and did the discount double check? Do you think that it would have been crazy? This has been another episode of Bleav in the Broncos. Thank you so much, everybody. Make sure you subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. Make sure you follow Bri and myself on social media at Bri Maestas 303, at Patrick Chiotti. We will see you next time. Go Broncos.
Go Broncos.